Well, let's get going then. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Lynn O'Connor, and I am the District Governor-elect. Tonight, I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Ed Kowitz, a retired veterinarian, and my husband. He is also the District Polio Plus Chair. He has been a member of the small but mighty Kettle Falls Rotary Club for 5 years, and he served either President-elect or President until now, and all that time. Couple of housekeeping things. If you guys don't mind, please keep your microphones on mute unless you're actively asking a question. If you open your participants pane, if you're on a computer, all you have to do is scroll down on the bottom and the pane will pop up. You'll have a raise hand little icon. You can do that to ask a question. We are encouraging questions during the presentation, so feel free. If you want, you can open your chat pane and you can type your question in there. Alan is going to be monitoring that. And so if you guys do have questions, he'll let us know. Okay, so let me go ahead and get this slide deck going and take it away, Ed.
Good evening. Thank you for showing up tonight, and hopefully you'll go away a little more knowledgeable about polio and Polio Plus. We're going to start out with a quiz, and the quiz is: there have been 2 viral diseases eradicated from the planet, and I'd like to know what they are. Karen.
I see Karen's raising her hand.
Smallpox.
Yeah, smallpox was the first viral disease eradicated. The last case was in 1977, and a guy by the name of Ollie Mullen was the last person to have smallpox. He did survive, and interestingly enough, he went on to serve in the polio eradication program of Somalia. Unfortunately, on one of his missions, he did contact malaria and ended up passing away from malaria. So what's the second one? I'm a veterinarian, so that may give you a hint.
And Ellen, you'll have to monitor because I can't use my mouse or see who's raising their hand. Anybody know?
I don't see a lot of hands. Okay.
Bill Dunwoody has an answer. Bill, unmute and give us your answer.
Anthrax.
Oh.
Well, unfortunately, no. Anthrax is a bacterial disease, and it's still.
Okay.
This disease is called rinderpest. Rinder
Okay.
meaning cattle, pest meaning disease, and it is a viral disease of cattle. It is highly infectious and has a high morbidity and maybe up to 100% mortality rate in herds that it would affect. And the last case of rinderpest was in 2012. And the only reason I bring that up, these 2 diseases were successfully eradicated from the planet using a massive vaccination program and surveillance, very similar to what we're doing with polio right now. It's been done before, so we can eradicate this disease, polio.
We can do it. Ed, how long has polio been around?
Well, dating back to 1500 BC or so, there have been indications that polio was present at that time. In this stone carving, you can see the priest's leg is tucked up, the muscles are all contracted down and much smaller than his left leg, which are typical signs that we see with somebody that had paralytic polio. The first major outbreak of polio in the United States was in 1894. And in 1908, Landstinger and Popper were the first 2 scientists to postulate that it may be caused by a virus. In 1931, Burnett and McNamara isolated the first polio virus, and they actually isolated all 3 types of polio, type 1, 2, and 3. Now, time for another quiz. What president is pictured on the US dime?
Bill Dunwoody, another shot.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
That's right. And what's the significance?
March of Dimes, I think, is one of
Yep.
the, okay.
He was a champion of the March of Dimes, and at the time they didn't feel anybody could afford to give dollars, so they thought that most everybody could give dimes. And I can remember when I was in school, we'd get these little packets, and I think it held like 6 dimes, and then we'd hand it in and they would send it off. And it was a pretty amazing success. The first year they received 2,680,000 dimes, which was a pretty significant amount of money back in those days. And funds raised from the March of Dimes really helped in the production and finding a vaccine for polio. In 1955, Dr. Jonas Salk was the first scientist to produce a viable vaccine for polio, and it was an inactivated vaccine. In 1961, Dr. Albert Sabin created the first oral polio vaccine, and it is really pretty much the same vaccine that we're using today. And with a massive effort of the eradication program in North America, the last case of polio in Canada was in 1977, and the last case in the US in 1979. In 1985, Rotary International created the Polio Plus program. It was the first and largest international coordinated public health initiative ever started. And Lynn has a little story she would like to tell now.
Here's where I get really excited about the things that Rotary is capable of. This is one of my favorite stories. So in 1985, Rotary International went to the World Health Organization and we asked them, would you like to partner on the global eradication of polio? And they laughed at us. They said, you're a service organization. And we said, well, we do have 1 million members around the world, and we happen to have $120 million to dedicate to the project. And they're like, well, let's have a seat and talk about it. And we went on from there. I love that about Rotary.
Okay, now let's jump forward 32 years to 2020. And polio went from having 300,000 cases a year, roughly 1,000 cases a day, to this year, it's 121 cases, I believe, only in 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Pakistan had 65, and I believe Afghanistan has had 37 so far this year, which kind of equates out to 1 case every other day, which is a pretty amazing feat.
Wait, I get to get excited about Rotary again. Look at those statistics, you guys. We have done that. I think that's just amazing, and I love to celebrate things like that.
Now I'd like to just talk a little bit about what polio is. It's also known as poliomyelitis, other names, infantile paralysis, and floppy baby syndrome. And the floppy baby syndrome got its name from when parents would pick babies up that were paralyzed, they would just flop. It is an infectious, highly contagious viral disease that affects children, mainly under 5 years of age. And the reason that it affects that age group mostly is they just haven't lived long enough to get any kind of immunity. As we live in our environment, we're exposed to all kinds of things, but this group just hasn't had time to have that done. So it's a very easy way for the virus to get in. It's spread through primarily fecal contamination. I chose this slide because you can see the kids out playing in the dirt and how easily it would be to transmit the virus back and forth. It enters through the oral route, and the virus is swallowed and it attacks the cells lining the intestinal tract. A virus will attach a receptor site on a cell. It'll penetrate the cell membrane and inject its genetic material into the cell. And the virus has no way of reproducing itself, so it hijacks the mechanisms within the cell that it attacks and starts to replicate itself. It'll reproduce in there, and eventually the cell will die and rupture and release the virus into the intestinal tract, where it can end up doing one of three things. It can either pass out in the stool and infect the environment, where it can infect other people. It can infect other cells in the intestinal tract to produce more virus, or it can enter the bloodstream and then affect muscles, nerves, spinal cord, or even the brain. And an interesting fact about polio, and which makes it hard maybe to detect early in an outbreak, is that 75% of the people that are affected with polio never show any clinical signs, but yet they'll pass the virus for 6 to 8 weeks after being infected. And that's called abortive polio. 24% of the people will show signs, more flu-like syndrome, temperature, muscle aches, that sort of thing. 10 to 14 days, they're over it, and that's called the non-paralytic form. Only about 1% of the people will actually show aflaccid paralysis and will actually get nerve damage, nerve death, muscle atrophy, and that's known as paralytic polio. But really only about half of those people end up having a permanent disability from having polio. More recently, there's been a syndrome known as post-polio syndrome, and that's where maybe 15 to 40 years after a person has been infected with paralytic polio, they'll start to show signs again. And a lot of reason for that is that once a nerve cell dies, it's gone forever. And so if a nerve cell dies to one muscle group, oftentimes an adjoining nerve will send out feelers over into that muscle group and start to innervate it again. Well, what that does is put a huge load on that nerve, and they end up becoming failing as time goes on because of the increased load that's put on them.
Is there a cure for polio?
Nope, there isn't a cure for polio. The only treatment is supportive care, which primarily is pain relief. If it affects the muscles of respiration, we have to supplement that some way. And back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, that's where you saw the iron lung used a lot. The other important aspect of getting people back functionally back from polio is physical therapy. The disease is very preventable through vaccination. There are 2 vaccines that we use. One is an inactivated vaccine, and that's where you take the polio virus and you actually kill it, you attenuate it, and just put the dead viral particles in the vaccine and inject that into the system. It's a very safe vaccine in that it will never reproduce and cause disease. The disadvantage to it takes a lot more training to be able to give a shot, and it only will immunize that one person. The vaccine that we primarily use in the eradication of polio is the oral polio vaccine, which is a modified live vaccine. And a modified live vaccine is where we take a virus and we change it or we attenuate it to where it will still grow in the body and replicate, but won't cause disease. And it acts just like a regular polio virus. It's enters the body, goes through the replication process in the body, and sheds virus just like if they would have polio, but it doesn't, in most cases, doesn't cause any disease. And the advantage there is that you immunize one person, that person will shed that into the environment and immunize other people in the community without them ever having gotten the oral vaccine. That also is the disadvantage to the vaccine. If in certain low populations with low immunity, you give that vaccine, it starts to go through people, and the more passages that virus goes through people, the better the chance it has to mutate. And that does happen, like 1 in a million that will happen. And when you're giving millions and millions of doses, it does show up. And that, when it does, that's called vaccine-derived poliovirus, and it causes the same disease that the wild polio virus causes. And in different areas of the world, we are fighting that as well as the wild polio virus.
Is that why India went back to the IPV?
Well, that using the inactivated vaccine is the end stage. Once we have eradicated the wild polio virus and also the vaccine-derived polio virus, we are going to use the inactivated because of the safety. We started out using a trivalent vaccine, and we are now using, as of 2016, a bivalent vaccine, whereas in 1999 was the last case of type 2 polio.
That's us.
and they wanted to drop that, and they felt it was safe to drop it because the last case of wild polio was type 2 was in 1999, and at that time 40% of the vaccine-derived poliovirus was caused by the type 2. And type 3 hasn't been seen since 2012.
That's us again.
And last October, it was considered eradicated also. Unfortunately, the type 2 vaccine-derived poliovirus is making a rebound due to it not being in the vaccine anymore, and the stoppage of a lot of due to COVID-19, a lot of the vaccination programs. But what they do is go into those communities and they use a monovalent type 2 vaccine to attack those particular instances where they find it. And the type 2 accounts for up to 90% of the vaccine-derived poliovirus at this time.
Are vaccinations the most important part of our program?
It is. Without the vaccine, obviously, we're not going to make any headway because that's what's giving the immunity to people. But almost an equally important part is the surveillance that we are working on. There are two aspects to the surveillance. One is actually finding cases of polio. Polio, or what they look for, is acute aflaccid paralysis, or people become acutely paralyzed. I believe there's like 100,000 cases of aflaccid paralysis in the world every year, but only a small percentage of those are actually polio. So it's important that we go to those, we analyze and diagnose every single one of those to rule in or out polio. The other main part of it is environmental surveillance. There's a whole team that routinely checks water samples and sewage samples to find any sign of poliovirus there, whether it's wild poliovirus or vaccine-derived poliovirus. And when they do find a positive sample, they can increase the resources in that area to increase vaccinations and help prevent any widespread outbreak from that. There are many stories, but I have one from I think it was 2014, and it was from Brazil when they hosted the World Cup games there. They were doing their routine sampling and did find poliovirus in the sewer system at Sao Paulo Airport. And the interesting thing is that they've been studying this virus long enough that once they do pick up a virus or a sample that's positive, they can tell which part of the world it came from. And this one happened to come from Africa, and they increased their resources, increased their vaccination program, and it never went any farther than that. But it truly is, polio is only a plane ride away. And things that worry me somewhat now, in both the US and Canada, there are many places where vaccinations are dropping below 70%, and our herd immunity is dropping. And the importance of that herd immunity is that if a virus comes into a population that is only 70% immune, that leaves 30 people that are susceptible. So that virus has a much easier time finding a person to infect. And then once that person is infected, that virus has a lot easier chance of finding another person to reinfect. Whereas if you have a 95% immunity and you only have 5 people out of 100 that have the potential of getting sick, it's much harder for that virus to find somebody to infect. And if it does, it's even that much harder to find somebody else to infect. And so when you have a 95% immunity rate, it's almost impossible for that virus to spread.
You say that the potential for a polio outbreak is only a plane ride away. Is that why we have to keep on working on eradicating polio?
Yes, it is. And I've read or listed 5 reasons that it's important that we end polio now. 1, it's to improve lives. There's over 17 million people walking today that wouldn't be if we hadn't started the Polio Plus program. To improve children's health, polio, not only do we vaccinate for polio, we also monitor for other diseases. In some cases in the world, children under 5 are permanently blind because of a vitamin A deficiency. So when we have our vaccination programs, in those areas, we administer vitamin A or monitoring for measles or other health as of like COVID-19 more recently. And to save money, a polio-free world would decrease or save us $40 to $50 million in health costs alone. And then the other one is make history. In 1985, we promised as Rotarians, the children of the world, that we would eradicate polio from the face of the earth. And Rotarians are people of integrity, and we do what we say. And so one day, not soon, but one day we will say that we have eradicated polio and have accomplished our goals. And the integrity part of this whole thing was brought home to me a little bit just in a project that we're doing in our own club. We're building a playground, or actually redoing a playground. And we wrote a letter to different businesses in the area. And without question, they wrote us check. I mean, significant amount of money, 2 $5,000 checks and $1,000 checks, $2,500 without questioning, just because they know that Rotary does what they say they're going to do. They have that integrity, and they know that we're people of action and that we will follow through and do what we say.
So
Go ahead.
Ed, what is the plus?
No, I
Oh.
have one more thing.
Oh, sorry. He's just full of information.
Well, and the other thing that I find probably one of the most compelling things to continue on with the vaccination program or eradication program is that if we would stop today our efforts in vaccinations, within 10 years, we could be seeing as many as 200,000 cases of polio every year again.
So what is the plus in Polio Plus?
Well, it's other things than actually directly with preventing polio. Like in this instance, the Polio Plus program helped set this person up in a business so he could support himself. In this case, Mr. Ollie has a goat farm, and he used to have to hire people to deliver his feed. The Polio Plus program gave him a tricycle, and now he can use that money in other areas of his business. And clean water, sanitation is an important part of Polio Plus program. Other things like mosquito netting in areas where malaria is prevalent, they will hand out mosquito netting. Hiring and training vaccinators is a very important part of what we do in the Polio Plus program. And also providing education to people so they can understand polio better and better able to help prevent it. And now in the time of COVID, it just plugs right into the whole program. We're very good at contact tracing, and we have a network of labs all over the world that are now running COVID tests to help control the COVID pandemic.
So we're coming up on World Polio Day in the year 2020, October 24th. Anybody want to share what your clubs might be doing for World Polio Day this year?
Well, perhaps I can start. We've got a person who is very well known in the Cranbrook community by the name of Karen Penner. She has been instrumental in doing some amazing things with programs with young women. And it's basically a program called the Sam Steele Sweethearts, but it is one of those programs that has affected hundreds, literally hundreds of young women. But the other thing is that she is listened to because she was the manager of the Chamber of Commerce in Cranbrook for, longer than I even want to think. But the point is, she's also a polio survivor. And she has a story. And she will be talking to my club, the Cranbrook Sunrise Club, not quite on the day because we don't meet on the 24th, but she'll be speaking to our club on the 22nd. She has spoken to the other Cranbrook club, and I have heard her presentation, and it is riveting. So for the many people who have never actually experienced one step away from the disease itself, if you have an opportunity to have someone who is a survivor of polio, see if you can't get them to come to your program, to your club, and give a program. It will be an amazing motivation to people who all of a sudden the thing becomes real. It really is an incredible experience. That's Cranbrook Sunrise.
Anybody else want to share what your club is doing? No? Okay. Oh, Karen?
Our club is working with the local newspaper to do a week-long program. We had an article in the paper yesterday about World Polio Day. We used some of the facts from the RI World Polio Day Toolkit, and we just shared that information with the paper and they put it in an article for us. We're also using some of the graphical material in the toolkit for ads that will run on the 2 highest circulation days for the newspaper prior to World Polio Day. And our club meets on Tuesday mornings, so October 20th will be our club presentation, our annual polio update, and members of our club foundation committee will be making that presentation. It'll be part PowerPoint and part videos. We're using one video from RIBI, one video on the Africa wild polio eradication from WHO. And then at the very end of our presentation, we're using the This Close short video to kind of wrap it up. But that's part of an annual presentation we do in our club around World Polio Day.
Alan, I think there's something in the chat, but I can't read it from my screen.
There we go. Bill Dunwoody's next.
Okay, Tri-City Sunrise. We have been focusing a lot internally within the club on polio this month. We did had a video that we ran this past meeting, this past Friday. It was the WHO video. We are also doing an internal collection. We haven't done too much on the outside, primarily because of the shutdown that we're on. We're trying to be we have done some postings to our website and to Facebook and so forth. And we're finding that most of the people that are associated with us and follow us are getting good information on the polio, World Polio Day. But we're doing an internal collection of funds in that since we have not been meeting, the cost of meals has not been charged to our members, and we've asked our members to consider taking those monies that they would normally pay for their meals and contribute that to the polio fund. So we have that coming in as we speak, and hopefully we'll have a significant amount of funds to at least meet our goal, if not more than our goal for this year. So we'll see. I'm hoping that we'll meet our goal. So
Cool. That's wonderful. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. Just one of the things that I think Pat Barkley is the only Canadian club on here besides me, and he's already seen our iron lung. So I guess there's no point in suggesting that we should have iron lung races down the hill between Kimberly and Cranbrook.
That would be interesting, though.
Yeah, maybe not.
Maybe I'll put in a couple of points here. We are doing some social media advertising of the World Polio Day. Interestingly, one of our members just pulled an article out of the 1952 Kimberly Bulletin newspaper, and I'll just quote a couple of things out of here. It says, Kimberly has been harder hit this year with polio than most districts in the immediate area. And they go on and describe the type of cases. 2 new cases were reported in the city last night, 1 this morning, bringing the total count to 20. So in a small community like Kimberly, that was a lot of cases. 3 of those children died in the first few months of the pandemic at that time. And they also traced a number of cases from Kimberly to other places where there was a child who ended up in Kelowna, They had obviously caught it in Kimberley, and another one, I've lost the place they went to, but moved out of town and was traced that way as well. And one of the interesting things is back in 1952, the Kimberley Rotary Club had a wading pool in the Rotary playground. And there was certainly a lot of concern that maybe some of the virus was spread in the wading pool. So not only the pools in town were closed, but the Radium Hot Spring pool was closed and the Fairmont Hot Spring pool was closed. So it certainly was a widespread thing in the East Kootenays of British Columbia at that time. And I have a cousin who had polio, and my wife was told that she had infantile paralysis as a child and couldn't walk for 4 or 5 months when she was, I think, about the under age 5. So it's certainly at home here. And we do a weekly polio fundraising event. Every time we have a meeting, we have a polio fundraising event. And I won't say too much because the lottery people might get after us. So.
Well, thank you for sharing. It sounds like some nice direct experience. Ed, this has been a really long effort. Do we have reason to celebrate?
Well, yes, we have lots to celebrate. In 1988, when the Global Polio Initiative was founded, there were 1,000 cases of polio a day. Now we're 1 every other day. We've eradicated 2 of the 3 types of wild polio virus, type 2 and 3. Type 1 is the only wild polio virus left in the world, and we have successfully isolated it to 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now that Nigeria is wild polio virus free, the whole continent of Africa is completely free of wild polio virus. By the end, another thing that I found is a new vaccine that they're developing or have been developing for several years, and they're going to roll it out under an emergency World Health Organization emergency licensing, and it's called the novel oral poliovirus type 2 or vaccine type 2. And the real advantage with this vaccine, it is not likely to mutate back to where it can cause disease. So it should help in preventing that vaccine-derived polio virus. And I think those are 4 things that are really important.
And that's us.
Yep.
Ed, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yes. I'll be honest with you, the bottom line is that it will take several more years and a lot more money to accomplish this. But it is in our grasp to prevent this from happening to anyone again in the future.
And now we come down to this part, which you knew we were going to do. It's easy to donate. It's very easy to donate, especially if you go on Rotary.org. You can sign into My Rotary or not. The way I prefer to do it is I have an automatic withdrawal every month from my account. That way I don't have to remember. That does a couple of things. It maintains my Paul Harris Society membership, which I'm really proud of. Every couple of years I'll change it. I'll have the funds dedicated to the annual fund. Last couple of years, I've had them dedicated to the Polio Plus Fund. Ed prefers to do it a different way.
Well, I pay a lot of my bills online, and I go in there once a month to do that. And so I've just connected the annual fund and Polio Plus in there, and I can choose when and how much to donate to and to which fund. And I think that's an easy way for me to do it, and it reminds me every month that I probably should do something. And I was on My Rotary the other day, and it's amazingly easy to donate there. You just click, as you open up My Rotary, sign in, click donate. You can click Polio Plus, and then put in your credit card and your amount, and you're done. It's really very easy.
Woo woo. Any final questions that the doctor is in?
The doctor is indeed in. Debbie, you have a question.
No, I just wanted to say fantastic job. I learned a lot. The pictures are always stirring, you know, and remind us that there's still work to be done. So thank you for putting this on. I thought you did a great job.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you. I was-
Anything else from anybody?
More questions, but
Yeah, I have a question.
Barkley. Pat Barkley.
Is there anywhere on the Rotary site where someone from the public can make a donation directly?
I will look, but I think you can.
Karen can answer.
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Yes, anybody can go to the Rotary website or to endpolio.org and donate. And anybody who does that gets the match from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is so important. So yes, anybody can go to endpolio.org, and that is part of the advertising kit in the World Polio Day Toolkit, and that's included in the ads we're using in the newspaper. I wanted to mention too that we have a couple of members in our club who have a lot of their own personal recognition points. And during October, when we focus on polio, we're going to announce our club goal and offer anyone who donates $100 or more to Polio Plus to get their points, to get their donation matched with points from those generous members who want to share.
What a great idea.
Yeah, that's a fantastic thing. And that sort of brings to mind a new program that's really creeping onto the stage. And Dr. Ed has learned a little bit about it. And I'm sure that if he's going to say a little bit tonight, he will be circulating a whole bunch more information. It's about the Polio Plus Society. Ed, do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, there are several districts that have formed their own Polio Plus Society, and most of them go, here's the pin that you get when you do it, and what it is that they want people to donate $100 a year until polio is eradicated, and if you join the society, you get this nice pin. Polio Plus Society. And I would like to start something like this in our district. I think it would be a good thing, and it isn't a lot of money, but you have to sign on until we're through, and I think there'd be a lot of people that would do that.
Well, as Jean-Luc Picard would say, make it so.
Yes.
Make it so. Yeah.
Mr. Barkley.
I just wanted to know if Karen knows, if somebody goes into endpolio.org, makes a donation, do you find out in your club, or can it be recognized to your club?
You know, actually not, unless it's a member who chooses to sign in. A donation is going to go to polio, and the donor is going to receive a tax receipt, but there wouldn't be any tie to a club or a district. It just would increase funds donated.
But if you do sign in under your name, then it does. If you,
It does.
Yeah.
It does indeed. And if your club wanted to advertise that you were raising money for polio and solicit donations to your club, you could, you know, get funds to be donated that would generate club recognition points. But I think people are interested a lot of times in getting the tax deductibility of their donations. So if they do that online to endpolio.org, they're going to get their tax receipt. If they donate to a club, they're not going to.
Now,
There
just
might
one
be a
more
way of
question
doing-
there.
Yeah, there might be a way of doing both of those, I think, guys, because there is that general form where you can submit a donation. Then you check box for Polio Plus or annual or whatever it happens to be, and there's a line there where you can credit the club.
Ah,
So you might be thinking, Pat, what you can do is you can take that form, and I'll look it up tomorrow if you want, and you can freeze it at a particular PDF style. It says this is made out so that the club will have the recognition. It's already typed in there. You know, freeze it into that, and just go from there, so they can fill in their personal information, and away they go.
yeah, I'm not aware of that form. That's good information. Thank you.
And Karen, is the minimum amount $20 like it is for most things in Canada? For the donation in order to get a tax receipt?
You know, I don't know the answer to that.
I think it's 25.
Well, even with Shelter Box, it's only 20, so
Huh.
probably in that range.
Reverse exchange rate. How nice. Yeah. Anyway, we'll double check on that. Anything else anybody would like to share? IPDG, Quay, you look like you're about to say something.
No, I didn't have anything to say really. I like the idea of what Karen did with the kit, because that's a great kit to use to publicize what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I just mention one more thing. The polio is kind of near and dear to my heart. My uncle, my dad's brother, was a doctor in Springfield, Illinois. And in the 50s, he was one of the ones treating polio, and they had a large outbreak there, and he died from it. He ended up catching it and died about 2 weeks later. So it affects the families.
Yeah, Pat.
I would like to, on behalf of all of us here tonight, thank Ed and Lynn for an excellent presentation. Certainly, I learned a lot of new things, which is great. And it's great to see some faces I've known from the past, Karen. So thank you very much. Great job.
Indeed. Thank you to both of them, and especially to Ed for carrying the collar on the polio committee for this district. It's not an easy one to do, especially when you're poking 56 different horses with sticks.
I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. It was really nice to see you.
And we have it recorded, so for those people who weren't able to get it, because we know that life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. By the time Mark has had a chance to take the recording and buff it up a little bit, it'll be posted on the website so that others who wouldn't be able to get to it tonight anyway can still get access to it and benefit from the program that Dr. Ed put together. Last minute?
I also have a bunch of end polio bracelets that they sent. If anybody would like me to send them.
The treasure bracelet.
Yeah, just a little.
When we do our society program, we'll send a pin and a bracelet along with the first however many people we got bracelets for that sign up.
I bet you we could whip up a certificate too without any difficulty.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Lots of bling.
So I'll get on it because I love the bling.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, then.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, all, and be safe down there.